Yeah.
Most of these guys have lost something, and in the best case scenario, they've stayed the same. But how many of these people that we revered actually, progressed over time
Yeah,
and
not
got
all.
better?
Yeah, not many. I mean,
Jeff Beck did. Jeff Beck's a much better and much more interesting player now than he was when he was in the Yardbirds.
and yeah, I never really got into Jeff Beck solo stuff. I mean, instrumental rock is kind of it's you either like it or you don't. And I mean,
Yeah,
if I listen to
even
it, I admire it, but I can't. I have a hard time just kind of rocking out to it, and it doesn't make me want to drive faster.
no, it's not that kind of music
Yeah.
for the most part. But if you look at it from a pure guitaristic sort of standpoint, everyone over a certain age will rightfully or wrongfully tell you that the greatest thing that ever happened to guitar is Jimi Hendrix, and no one ever took it any further than Jimi Hendrix. Well, that's not true post 1980. Jeff Beck took it further. Jeff Beck is doing things on guitar that Hendrix couldn't have dreamed of. And this is not a slag on Jimi Hendrix, but the man died. Okay, so Jeff Beck kept playing. Jeff Beck dropped the pick and started using all of his fingers and getting these different tones and these different techniques. And he's really created a unique guitar style that is purely him.
Yeah.
And it's way advanced. I mean, you know, if you're a guy who just plays with a pick, you can't do that stuff, right? And it's a remarkable use of the instrument in a completely original way.
Yeah.
That is, in my opinion, leagues beyond anything what Hendrix did on the instrument. Now, Hendrix was a way better songwriter than Jeff Beck. Hendrix's music, you could argue, is more accessible than Jeff Beck's music. But just from the position of advancing guitar to a level that no one else is approaching. It's not so much his left hand and speed and stuff like that. It's about sonics. It's about creating, different dynamics with the instrument and all of this stuff that he manages to get between. If you ever watch him play, watch him live and you see what he does with the guitar, where he's constantly got the whammy bar under his hand, and he's working the volume knob with his pinky, and he's plucking the strings with these fingers, and the left hand is not doing anything specifically difficult. But what he manages to coax out of that instrument sonically is completely different than, these guys who can shred like nothing, like Petrucci and Paul Gilbert. Those guys are wonderful in a different way.
Right.
But at a certain point, we all look at Jeff Beck and we go, "Oh my God, how's he doing that?" The intonation, all of this stuff that is just uniquely him. Okay, so I mean, I could play you. I could show you a zillion people you've never heard of playing Paul Gilbert licks. Right, and playing them as well or as fast, and there's 9-year-olds on YouTube doing it. It's a fairly mechanical, robotic thing to get that, but no one's doing what Jeff Beck's doing,
right,
with guitar. And
what's a good example of another famous player that was clearly inspired by him?
Gary Moore was inspired by him, also by Hendrix, also by Peter Green. Steve Lukather, huge Jeff Beck fan. You don't hear it so much in his playing directly. Joe Perry, big Jeff Beck fan. I think all of the guys that we talk about, I don't think there's anyone. Dave Gilmour is a huge Jeff Beck fan. Jimmy Page is a huge Jeff Beck fan. Now, you're talking about other guitarists, and you're talking about, you didn't personally, it didn't speak to you musically, and I understand that because some of it is very jazzy.
Right.
And he typically writes with other people because he's not a writer.
Well, it's kind of the same with guys like God, what's the guy's name who did the solo albums with David Lee Roth?
Steve Vai?
Steve Vai, yeah, Steve Vai, and the guy who taught him. I don't know why the names are slipping me now.
Oh, Satriani.
Yeah,
Satriani.
and those two guys. Whenever I listen to their music, it blows my mind how quick they are. And I tried. I mean, I looked at the sheet music a couple times and tried to play along, and even if at half speed, I was like, oh my god, it's no way I'm gonna ever keep up with those guys. And when I listen to it, it just impresses me, and I could never touch it personally, but it.
But do you enjoy it more than AC/DC?
No.
So there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really sort of the question. It's like, so this is another thing that we tend to talk about at my website anyway. It's like, there is stuff that impresses your brain, and there's stuff that like reaches south of your belt and says, makes you want to throw your fist in the air.
Yes.
And rock out.
Yeah.
Okay. And the best guys can do both.
Right.
All right. The best guys will give you that visceral, oh yeah, I love this song, I love this riff, it moves me. And yet when you get to the part where they need to impress you technically, they do that too.
Eddie Van Halen
Right.
is one of those guys for me.
He's one of those guys that, for me personally, and I know this is blasphemous, as wonderful as he is, his lead style doesn't really do much for me. It's
Really?
It's a little bebopish. I appreciate it, but I prefer things that are a little more melodic and a little bit more sexual, if you will, in terms of its impact and its ability to coax other emotions out of me. I'm not trying to rag on it. I'm just saying, for all of the wondrous stuff that he does, it doesn't have an emotional impact on me like some other players' styles do. Doesn't mean I don't love Van Halen. I do. But to me, he's not a particularly satisfying melodic player.
What would be like someone who would do both of those?
Michael Schenker.
Okay. Yeah.
Somebody like that. Michael Schenker is wonderfully melodic. Everything he plays is melodic. He's got great chops as well. When I'm talking about Schenker, I'm not talking about the last bunch of years. I'm talking about when he was in his prime from like 1974 to 84, when he was really creating masterful solos that had, that really told a story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end.
What's
a good example? Anything from that era. Listen to the solo in Lost Horizons. Listen to the solos on his first two solo albums, and most of the UFO stuff. There are tons of examples in that period. He doesn't play that way anymore. He still has all of the technical ability, but he used to compose solos that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it was like a song within a song. It had an arc, like a song has an arc.
Right.
Okay. And to me, that was more influential on my playing personally than Eddie, who was just sort of like, grooving along like a horn player almost.
Yeah.
He was very influenced. Eddie was very influenced by Alan Holdsworth, who was very influenced by a sax player named John Coltrane, who, Holdsworth would take John Coltrane's saxophone solos and transcribe them for guitar, and he'd learn how to play them on guitar.
Oh, wow.
And then Eddie responded very much to that. But I mean, you're talking about bebop jazz now.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it either connects with you or it doesn't, whether you're getting it from Eddie or if you're getting it from Holdsworth or you're getting it from John Coltrane.
Isn't Holdsworth the guy who has like the weird guitar without a headstock?
Yeah, he had one of them. I mean, that wasn't always his guitar, but I mean, towards the end, he had something like that.
I think
and by the way,
yeah,
he was a brilliant player, but I mean, again, the music isn't like accessible for the masses. It's for guitar geeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked him up based off that Eddie Van Halen profile, and he's playing with a jazz band, and he's doing these amazing...
He's not a rock player. Yeah,
No.
he's not a rock player. There's a lot of great players out there who are not rock players, but you know, the focus of the guitar style that we have always revered at our site, you know, another guy like that who plays brilliantly melodically and is ridiculous chops, as well as Uli Roth, who used to be in the Scorpions and now has a solo career for a long time. And there's lots of these people. You know, Gary Moore's solos when he was a rock player were always ridiculously wonderful. He was a guy who also injected such intensity into everything he played, every note he played, and his solos were compositional. They too had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and he'd usually try to end on some kind of a high note, a crescendo, or something like that. And to me, like I said, that resonated more with my personal style of how I approach guitar than somebody like Eddie, who was certainly much more, I guess, experimental and jazzy and willing to do things that were just, you know, they were certainly less conventional.
Right. Oh, what attracted me to Eddie Van Halen is because it's also got a lot of humor, his playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot of that too. And, you know, Steve Vai gets a lot of that from Eddie and from Frank Zappa, working with Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of humor in their styles, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And like I said, I'm not trying to say I don't like Van Halen. I do, but I'm just saying he was never like a guy whose playing I wanted to emulate.
Right.
I appreciate it, but it wasn't what I wanted to. Wasn't in the direction of where I wanted to go. There were other players who were his contemporaries who I enjoyed more.